Welcome to video number 2. I bet you are super excited to dive into these 3 secrets, and so am I. So that you understand them, would it be okay if I told you how I came across these with a vulnerable personal story? I have always sucked at getting things done, except, of course, at the last minute. I didn't want to do everything at the last minute. I just couldn't seem to change. And so I turned to self-help. Stephen Covey, Tony Robbins, Brendon Burchard, David Allen, Jack Canfield, Napoleon Hill, Brian Tracy, dozens, and dozens more. Over the next 15 years, I did visualizations. I went to seminars. I did online courses. I got certifications in coaching and NLP and all these things. I read affirmations to myself in the mirror. I wrote down 10-year goals and 5-year goals and my eulogy at my funeral. I put up vision boards of all the amazing pictures of things I wanted to create and manifest. And I listened to self-hypnosis CDs. And yet my struggles continued. Am I the only one on these things? So I ended up failing out of my first 7 jobs and businesses with an average tenure of 9 months. I actually remember one day in my early 30s, after a bad work week, I was feeling depressed and I was commuting home, and I actively was plotting like how I would live when or if I became homeless. Not like a hypothetical exercise, but like a genuine, like, oh, who would I be friends with? And then as my failures piled up, my marriage was disintegrating, my depression was increasing. So I begrudgingly accepted a family member's suggestion that I go to another life-changing weekend seminar. And yeah, I felt motivated after the event, but what happens after that? You all know it faded soon after, right? And so desperate, I agreed to invest in additional programs the company offered. How many of you have done that? In this case, it worked out though. Those programs met weekly instead of for a weekend. And I also had a team and a coach where I was making weekly commitments. And something weird happened. I started getting stuff done. My intentions became actions. My action machine started working. And that was when I had this amazing epiphany. My action machine isn't broken. Mainstream self-help is just the absolute wrong fuel for it. In just 6 years from that realization, I went from broke, divorced, and earning minimum wage to a successful Fortune 500 career consulting to some of the biggest names in the world and a $180,000 increase in my yearly salary income, which was pretty cool. But the real payoff was I actually felt capable for the first time in my life. How many of you don't even like that would actually be I got remarried to an amazing partner. We live in 10 beautiful acres in Michigan. I grew my social media to a bunch of followers. And honestly, for me, the biggest thing was just getting to quit a soul crushing job and get to change lives for a living. That's pretty cool, right? So that is my story. Let me ask you, can you relate to my experience of under earning income or investing in a bunch of courses and things you didn't use or lower life satisfaction because of relationship problems or just unfulfilled dreams? Okay, so it turns out there's actually research validating our experience. So let's look at 3 areas: income, education, life satisfaction. So in terms of income, multiple studies have shown a consistent income gap between ADHDers and non-ADHDers with the same background, experience, skills. Here's a table from that research. In these age brackets, the range was from $12,656 per year to $22,215 every single year, every year. And we get raises based on our current salary. So it starts to compound. The overall, when they put all the different age brackets in, I think averaged out to 10,000 because there wasn't really a difference for the youngest and age brackets. That's like kind of shocking, right? Like that's a big deal. Okay. In terms of education, so I already told you that I invested way too much. I didn't even put all the things on there, like Dale Carnegie classes, sales training, marketing courses, Excel spreadsheet classes, life coaching, writing courses. And I loved studying it all. Who are my learners? Who loves learning this stuff? And I did very little with it. And here's the thing. So Dr. Russell Barkley, he's an ADHD author, researcher, talks about, he basically just says like studying something where you know it is a waste of time because we can't use it. So he says that basically the back of our brain is where information and knowledge is stored, but it's our front of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, that controls action. That's where our executive functions are. That's where we're planning and organizing and deciding what action to take and inhibiting actions we don't want to take. And he says that there's basically, it's like two separate brains. There's like a meat cleaver, is his word, between these two. And so he says, even if you know how to do a skill, the likelihood it will get implemented is pretty slim. How many of you can relate to this? You know how to do these things, but it's implementing them, actioning them. So he says it's actually not a knowledge disorder. And he said this is one of the places that a lot of people mess up is they try to get more information, but the real thing is it's a performance disorder. How do I get myself into action when I decide to, not when our brain decides to? And then life satisfaction. There's been studies where ADHDers are at a higher risk for divorce. We're 2.7 times the risk for depression. And then in terms of life dreams, we are chronic procrastinators, 75% of us. And we all know that procrastination and ADHD tend to go hand in hand. So do your struggles make more sense now? Like, is it any surprise that we feel overwhelmed? So before we go into solutions, we're actually going to start here with secret number 3. We're going to do a fun exercise to show your upside potential called the yearly ADHD tax. And because life satisfaction is hard to measure, we're going to look at hard costs. So income, education, and then other ADHD tax. Okay. So let's start with income. So you saw in the data that the average gap was 10,000 to 20,000 plus a year. For me, it was like 180,000 a year. So write down for yourself in this first box, you have 3 boxes. What is it for you? Like with your education, talents, experience, how much could you be earning if you could do tasks when you decide to, not when your brain decides to? You can compare yourself to people with similar backgrounds, education, training, whatever. So this is considered like an ADHD tax in the sense that if the ADHD wasn't in the way, how much more could you be earning? So yes, we're looking for the gap, not for the total income. All right. Second one. So let's look at education. So you're going to come up with a number here. And again, we're going to add all 3 numbers at the end. So if you're anything like me, you've invested, I probably over 6 figures at this point, but you've invested thousands of dollars into education, degrees, courses, seminars, workshop programs where you learned a lot, but failed to use most of it. So come up with an estimate on like how much, again, you're sort of looking at the gap. Like, so you go and spend $10,000 on some big training, but then you don't execute it. So like, how much value did you get from that? Maybe $9,000 of that value isn't realized. So just come up with a yearly estimate. This is a little bit of a guess, but go ahead and I'll give you 20 seconds to do that. Last one, other ADHD tax. So, this is where if you talk to most people, ADHD tax, this is what they think of. So like, things like late fees and subscriptions that you haven't canceled and back taxes or other penalties or higher prices on last minute travel and entertainment purchases or crazy impulse buys because you feel bad about yourself and then you can't return them. So whatever that is, you probably need to do some estimating here, but come up with a yearly average of how much of the traditional ADHD tax, this other ADHD tax, you pay. Some people it's like $20,000 a year. Others it's like $500 a year. Okay. All right. So go ahead now and get out your calculators and add those 3 numbers together. Again, you're looking for the gap or like the tax on that. So if you're earning $30,000 or less than you could be earning, or you spend 10 grand on a bunch of certifications and you only use 10% of it, or you have a bunch of fees, add those together for your yearly ADHD tax number. Okay. So that exercise shows you where your upside potential is from being able to do tasks when you decide, not when your brain decides. Let's dive into secret number 1 in our great ADHD order, how to access on-demand motivation for even the most boring tasks. I'll see you in the next video.